Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. We know that getting to Central Park is still difficult for a lot of people during these crazy times, so we want to continue bringing the park to you through in-person tours, longer 45-minute virtual programs, as well as our more casual 15-minute weekly walks. Thank you for joining us today for another rendition of our 15-minute casual strolls through the park, known as our weekly walks. Today, we're going to be exploring a really fun landscape and one that's very appropriate during this time, the Arthur Ross Pinetum. We're going to explore this 4-acre landscape today, making our way through the park, seeing the park's present beauty through photographs that were taken by myself here in Central Park over the past few days, with 1 or 2 historic photos that I accessed through various databases, such as the New York City Parks Department database, the Central Park Conservancy photo archive, as well as the Museum of the City of New York's photo archives. Thank you again for joining us today on what we can consider really the first day of winter. Yesterday, we did have the winter solstice, so it's very appropriate today that we're exploring the Arthur Ross Pinetum, a 4-acre arboretum of pine trees, of course, evergreen trees that are going to provide beauty all season long. Evergreen trees for a lot of cultures like the ancient Hebrews, Egyptians, pagans, and Chinese always represented eternal life and prosperity. And these trees were heavily honored and celebrated on days like the winter solstice. So being the day after, it's very appropriate for us to explore this little 4-acre landscape that holds a traditional part of Central Park's history, as well as a modern escape for us during the wintertime. Before we begin, of course, you may be familiar with our work. We are the Central Park Conservancy, and we're the main caretakers of Central Park. Our main goal is to keep the park clean and green, preserving and celebrating Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. Before we begin, of course, a little bit of housekeeping. We're using Zoom, so please use the chat feature if you want to share a favorite memory of the park, or specifically the Arboretum, or maybe even a favorite tree that you have in the park. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature, and my colleagues Jose and Juan are on the back end answering any questions you might have. Last thing you'll see pop up are some visitor polls I'll launch throughout the walk. Once everybody has voted, I can end that and share the results. Now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our winter stroll through the park as we walk to and through to get to the Arthur Ross Pinetum. We're going to explore a few other areas on our walk. And as we start, even though it is winter, it doesn't really feel like it. We do have some sunshine coming through. The air is a little bit crisper, but we don't have any snowfall just yet here in New York. As we start to enter the park over at 85th and 8th Avenue, we'll walk along the shadows of these twisting paths, which will take us up along some nice, beautiful views and features. And as we make our way up, we can see some leaves still holding onto the trees, as well as some shrubs that are providing some color. This red twig dogwood will add a little bit of very festive color to the winter season. We'll see not only red twig dogwood, but yellow twig dogwood. You can guess what color that is, adding a little bit of flair to this seemingly bare landscape. But of course, as we keep walking, even with the sun shining, we can get beautiful views, a lot of contrasting light, and some of those deciduous trees which are still holding onto their leaves. Today, we're primarily going to see a lot of pine trees, a specific type of evergreen tree, as we walk around the park. Making our way up, we're coming to Summit Rock, the highest point in Central Park, the highest natural elevation, I should say. If you do visit Belvedere Castle's viewing decks, that is the highest human-made point in the park. But this Summit Rock area, which is about 141 feet in elevation, will be the highest natural point in Central Park. And we can see today it's a great area for picnicking and for kids to play. Looking over out towards the west, we can get a view down about right around 82nd Street. And this view at one point would have showed us the Hudson River, as well as the Palisades area of New Jersey. But of course, it's been a little blocked off today. Although when we come into the park, we like to focus on, of course, the inside of the park. And this Summit Rock area has a nice balance of architecture, as well as a nice peaceful landscape to explore. This area would get a restoration project done around 1997. During which time it would become more accessible, getting this little stage area, which is really fun for kids and communities that come and utilize this area. As we make our way down the steps and down the hill of Summit Rock along the south edge, we can walk down some wonderful stone carved steps, making our way to the lower landscape, which seems a little bit bare right now with all the deciduous trees. But once we hang a quick left, we're greeted by a little bit more color and full leaves in the form of these types of evergreen trees. As we make our way over, we can see some of these evergreen trees that sit next to Winterdale Arch. Evergreen trees are, of course, trees that keep their leaves year long. And many of these evergreen trees we appreciate during the season are conifers, meaning they have needle or scaly leaves rather than a broad flat leaf like broadleaf trees. This is an eastern white pine, which is the most common pine tree in New York and the most common pine tree you're going to find here in Central Park. I believe there's a couple hundred or so, about 150 white pine trees found throughout the park, but really beautiful, nice draping needles. We can also see some other type of evergreen shrubs like viburnum, which add a little bit of color to the park, keeping that nice green contrasting color with their waxy leaves. As we move past this area, we can also enjoy some of the beauty nearby, like Winterdale Arch, which we've seen plenty of times before. Winterdale Arch, really reminiscent of the winter season. And as we pass through that, again, we don't really have too much wintry views ahead of us, but as we start rounding up the path a little bit, we can see some things that certainly remind us of this season. As we start making our way up, I do want to launch our first poll. I mentioned yesterday was the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere, where we are here in New York. So today we are really getting into winter, and I do want to ask, now that the season is starting to get a little bit longer, but still getting dark early, have any of you had the opportunity to visit the park after dark? Now it's a lot easier because you can come into the park at 4:30 and it's basically dark out. So while everybody's voting in that, we'll continue and we'll look at this beautiful little evergreen tree we can see. As we come a little closer, we can see this isn't, in fact, a pine tree, but one of the other types of genuses or families of conifers we can find in the park. This that we can see right here is a spruce tree, a Norway spruce to be particular. We'll find a few different types of families of evergreen or conifers here in the park. Ones like, of course, pine trees, the most numerous type of conifer you'll find in Central Park, as well as things like hemlocks, cedars, firs, and spruce, which we can see here. This is a Norway spruce. Norway spruces are pretty common in the park, and you can find them in various areas. You also probably have seen a Norway spruce before if you've ever seen the Rockefeller Christmas tree. This tree has been a Norway spruce since 1981. This is actually a picture of the current Rockefeller Christmas tree. So if you do get a chance to witness it, you'll be looking at a very magnificent Norway spruce. We can actually find some similar, maybe not as tall, but close to this size Norway spruce trees here in Central Park. Near Cedar Hill and near Strawberry Fields are two spots where you can find amazing, immaculate Norway spruces. As we continue up past that Norway spruce, we're coming up to a different category of conifers, pine trees. Pine trees are the most numerous type of conifer we're going to find in New York, and certainly here in Central Park. And as we come up to the Arthur Ross Pinetum, we certainly have no shortage of these evergreen pine trees. We can also see is a wonderful little playground that sits along the side of the Arthur Ross Pinetum, this 4-acre landscape. This little playground is really a special one. It does have some younger kids swing equipment, as well as pull-up and exercise bars and picnic tables for those who'd like to recreate a little bit easier. But what it has really is an open outdoor playground, the only one of 21 playgrounds here in Central Park that does not have fencing around it. And this really provides a special feeling because it's purposefully done. So when you're swinging on these swings, your feet go right up into the pine trees, not obstructed by any type of fence or blockade. This is a really amazing playground that allows adults to even come and go swinging, even if you don't have a child. Certainly one of my favorite areas and one that I can't help but swing on when it comes to this area. As we continue moving around along the western side of the Pinetum, we can see just how large this 4-acre arboretum is. Again, this is just a collection of pine trees in this area, but really a very beautiful one. Today, we'll find upwards of about 17 different species of pine trees located here. And this would really start here in Central Park around 1971, coming as a gift from the generous philanthropist Arthur C. Ross. Arthur C. Ross worked for the Central National Corporation, which basically dealt with chemicals and wood pulp. And over the course of him working there, he developed a great passion for trees, specifically a lot of pine trees, which are heavily used in wood pulp and a lot of different wood processing types of materials and activities. We do see him in 1971 donating a modest collection of eastern white pines to the park to help create a more beautiful view and block out some of the buildings that existed there. We would see him adding to this area, putting in about 35 trees a year and eventually acquiring species from all different countries. Today, we can find species here that are both native, as well as ones from areas like Macedonia, the Himalayas, as well as Japan. Here are two of my favorites, which come from Japan right here. These are Yosho Pines, otherwise known as Japanese red pines. I love their almost small bonsai style look to them. And it's said that in about 30 years, these are probably going to be the most beautiful pine trees you'll find in Central Park. So certainly something to look forward to. As we continue walking along, I will just end that poll that we had launched before, and I can see that a lot of people have had the opportunity to make it to the park after dark. That's really cool because I feel like a lot of people avoid the park after dark. And of course, Central Park wasn't always the nicest area, so you might not have been encouraged to walk in the park after dark. But today, of course, a lot has changed. And whether you come in the park in the summer when it's really late and dark, or even during the winter when it gets dark a little bit earlier, it's really an amazing perspective to see. A lot of areas really become a lot more magical and transform completely after a little bit of shade or darkness falls over them. As we continue walking along, we'll make our way along the north side of the Pinetum. And of course, we have plenty of beautiful trees to see along the way. What we're coming up to here is a native tree called pitch pines, also nicknamed torch pines. They have a really beautiful yellow-green type of color to the needle. And we can also see some really nice color on the bark as well, which shows through some deeper red colors. I always get blown away though by the needles, which are a lot lighter in color compared to some of the darker evergreen needles we see on the pine trees behind these. But pitch pines are really known as a pioneer plant. If you were to clear out an area that was once human constructed, like an old parking lot, you'd probably see a pitch pine being one of the first plants to start growing there. Very hardy and very good at dealing with rocky soil, making them perfect for Central Park. As we move a little closer, we can always see even beautiful definition and detail up close on a lot of these trees. I'm a big fan of getting right up close and personal to a lot of flora in the park because we don't often have the opportunity to get up close to wildlife. But in terms of plants and things like this, we can really see some of the beautiful microcosms of detail that exist on some of the close branches of these plants. And as we make our way around, we can see some more beautifully decorated pine trees. The one we can actually see here is going to be a Japanese white pine, very different than the eastern white pine, the native pine we saw earlier. This one forming a little bit more clustery tufts of needles. Still having 5 needles, much like the eastern white pine we saw earlier, but this one being, again, a little bit more formed. These trees are actually very commonly used as bonsai trees. Even as they're growing large, they still kind of have that bonsai type look to them. What we can also see just beyond those trees, we can see the reason the Pinetum really began in the first place, to help block out this 86th Street maintenance building that exists along the backside of the Pinetum. This building would have at one point had some involvement with the Croton Aqueduct system, part of the receiving reservoir that once existed where today's Great Lawn is. But today it's used as the Central Park Police Precinct and as the Park Department building where maintenance equipment is stored. Of course, the big view that we get here from all the pine trees, which do a wonderful job of blocking out this building, increasing the serenity and enjoyment of the surrounding landscape and our view from areas like the Great Lawn. As we come a little closer, of course, there's a lot of different species of pine trees here, upwards of about 17 different varieties, which makes identifying a lot of them pretty hard. But a great way to learn about trees in the park is through our audio guide, which can be downloaded through the Bloomberg Connects app or be found on our website. And you can find text as well as audio information for a lot of landscapes, as well as specific trees. As we move around the eastern side rather, of the Pinetum, we can of course see many different more beautiful varieties of pine trees, as well as a few deciduous trees that have worked their way in, like these elms. As we make our way over, we can also see some of these trees are very happy to be in Central Park, sporting a little bit of flair to represent where they're located here. As we continue walking along, we get the sun blanking at us from the southern end, just barely peeking through some of these evergreen branches. We get some beautiful views as we walk towards the south of the Pinetum, making our way past what appear to be some Austrian pines, one of the most common pine trees you'll find in Central Park, next to the eastern white pines. As we make our way down a little bit more, we can also enjoy some of the beauty of the deciduous trees that blanket in this area. We can see plenty of eastern white pines adding a nice contrasting view. And without evergreens in the park would be a very different place. As we make our way down a little bit more, we start to get the expansive view of the Great Lawn. And as we look over this area, we can really ponder and imagine what the park would be like if we didn't have really any trees at all. But especially without evergreen trees, we'd have a much more open view of the buildings like we can see here. Having these evergreen trees is not only providing a good view, it's also even increasing our health. Phytoncides and some of the different natural scents that are produced from these types of trees actually help reduce our stress levels. They actually help with our nervous system and motor function, and they really just make us feel more peaceful and really serene. So it's really amazing that these trees not only provide a visual aesthetic for us, but also actually improve our health. As we pass by this area, we can also view this little plaque which honors Arthur Ross. And I really love this because you'll notice it says a gift from an interested citizen. Arthur Ross was a very humble philanthropist to New York and really the United States. He would do work out of New York as well in areas like Pennsylvania, helping to establish some art institutions, but he would do plenty of work here in New York, many times anonymously. One gift that was credited to Arthur Ross after his passing, a gift he made anonymously, was the Arboretum that you'll find in the New York Botanical Garden. So if you do ever make it up to the Arboretum there, you can thank Arthur Ross for donating that and helping to bring really tree education to all different areas of New York, as well as other exhibitions he would do at areas like the Cooper Hewitt Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. A quote I always loved of Arthur Ross that I'll mention as we make our way to our last stop was he was quoted as saying, "Big I am not, but I am interested and I can give some time." And I certainly love the sentiment. And as we come up to our final stop, I do want to share one last poll with you. What I'd like to share for this last poll is if you maybe have a favorite pine. Of course, there's about 17 or more varieties found in the park, and you'll only find about 8 or so listed on here. If there is another pine you like, maybe drop that pine that you like in the chat section. Or if you have a specific tree in the park in general you like, certainly let us know in the chat section. I'd love to see which tree you favor the most. But we'll make our way up to a tree that certainly everybody loves here in the Pinetum and all throughout the park. It's known as a Himalayan pine. These beautiful Himalayan pines are some of the larger trees we're going to see in the Pinetum right now, and they offer a beautiful view from far away as well as underneath. Himalayan pines are an Asian relative of the eastern white pine. However, these are said to be a little bit more beautiful. These are often compared or said to be the most beautiful pine tree you will ever see. It does have quite a bit longer needle than the eastern white pine, a lot more of a drooping effect, as well as a beautiful green tealish color, depending which angle you catch it on. But really no bad angles to view this tree from. It does have these really beautiful needles, as well as very large pine cones that can range in size from about 6 or 8 inches upwards to about 14 inches. Very, very festive pine cone to see around, and one that provides a lot of those phytoncides, that's phytoncides, which are those natural scents and oils that are coming from pine trees, ones that help us, again, get a little bit of that stress relief. As we come down here, we can take a little view up towards these drooping pine cones and needles, looking up at a clear blue sky, something that we can only enjoy for a little bit longer, because I'm sure in the coming weeks, we're gonna get plenty of gray skies and snow coming as it gets a lot colder and this area becomes blanketed with snow. But for now, we can certainly enjoy this almost summer feeling type of day that we have on somehow the first day of winter. As we take one last view out towards the Pinetum, we can appreciate all that this small 4-acre arboretum does for our health and for our enjoyment of the park. And even these small, quaint landscapes really add so much to the park, as the landscape once had a lot more conifers and evergreen trees that were unfortunately lost by about the 19th century. The Arthur Ross Pinetum today really satisfies that tradition of evergreens existing here in Central Park and does so in an absolutely beautiful way. If you haven't had the opportunity to make it to the Arthur Ross Pinetum, I highly encourage that you try to make the try to get a chance to make it up there. Whether you make it up there in Bear Park or densely covered snow, it certainly will not give you no shortage of beautiful views to see up there. As we do come to the end of our walk, I do want to share that last poll that we had, and I'm happy to see that a lot of us chose that last answer, any pine is fine. Certainly, I like a lot of people too are favoring the eastern white pines. The eastern white pine, I believe the tallest eastern white pine in the United States right now is over in Pennsylvania, and I believe it's about 184 feet tall. But you would find eastern white pines growing upwards of about 240 feet. The British were said to have discovered upwards of 240 feet tall eastern white pines found here, many of which were of course cut down and don't exist anymore, but we can still see plenty of really beautiful trees throughout the US today. But certainly any pine is fine, my sentiments exactly, as we explore the park, especially during the winter season, seeing a little bit of green left on these pine trees. As we do come to the end, again, I want to thank you for joining us and supporting us. There are plenty of ways to support us too, and sometimes you can even support us and give a gift to somebody else. So if you're looking for a last-minute holiday gift, consider a gift certificate to the Conservancy. You can use these for any of our in-person tours or any of our paid events. Never expire, never go bad. But of course, we have plenty of ways to get involved. On our website, we do have self-guided tours, tree guides, plenty of in-person tours and other virtual programs that are continuing as well. So certainly stop by, check out the Arthur Ross Pinetum, and learn a little bit about the largest type of conifer tree to be found in the park, the pine trees. But thank you again so much for joining us. I will leave this chat room open for a little bit longer in case anybody has any last-minute questions you can answer. But other than that, thank you again so much for joining us and supporting us here at the Central Park Conservancy. From all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.